The Yuletide season evokes thoughts and memories of glorious days of frost, ringing bells, and the magical aromas wafting from a warm, loving kitchen. And yet, the days are shorter, and the nights become long, dark, and cold journeys into a bizarre winter realm of menace, monsters, and wandering spirits. Blackwater Media presents A Creepy Christmas. My grandpa was one hell of a storyteller. I know that most grandfathers are. It kind of goes along with the whole idea of being older, wiser, and full of the kind of life experiences that go into making and telling endless, wild, funny, bizarre tales of days gone by. I remember that listening to those stories added to the euphoric, dizzying haze of summer afternoons sitting out on the screened-in front porch. It deepened the creepy but exciting sensations of cool October evenings that seemed to pile onto the enjoyment of an approaching Halloween. And oh my God, Thanksgivings, and especially Christmases, became high seasons for celebrating the fabled retelling of some of my grandfather's most harrowing exploits of the past. Of course, as we listened to the stories, we all knew that for the most part, these were at best tall tales, wild flights of fancy, with just enough truth sprinkled in to allow for at least the veneer of legitimacy. But I remember one Christmas, a Christmas that as an adult sticks out in my mind a little bit more than most, when the story that he told us brought out a very different kind of look on his face. As I grew up, the story had all but faded into the back lot in exchange for a predictable boyhood jungle of baseball, video games, movies, and cars. It's funny how the years can pile up on you and go by almost without being counted. Like I said, as an adult, I can remember that year or that Christmas quite clearly, as if someone had revealed to me an old, half-yellowed photograph from a dusty family album that had been all but forgotten. Anyway, my grandfather said that he wanted to tell us about something that happened to him, or rather something that he'd seen a long time ago that most people would consider too outrageous to believe. He said it was in January of 1940, and that he was then 29 years old. It was, he said, the beginning of a strange year full of signs and omens that to the observant were difficult to miss. Although he lived in the city, in those days, his favorite fishing spots and hunting grounds were never more than a 20-minute drive away. He made mention of the fact that the presence of deer had seemed to dwindle down to almost nothing. Back then, the bear population was higher than it is these days, but he knew that it couldn't account for the drastic absence of deer. Then there was the snow. Yes, it was not that unusual in January and February to see a little snow. Usually a modest dusting, and less often perhaps an inch or two every 5 or 6 years. After all, it was Georgia, and snowfall of any great significance was for the most part a novelty. But before that January was out, my grandfather said more than 8 inches of snow would fall. One cold January day, he said that he'd driven over to visit one of his buddies, Bill Donovan, whom everybody referred to as Donnie. They'd known each other since high school, and they'd spent many a day out hunting rabbit and deer and fishing in the numerous nearby lakes and ponds. When he got to Donnie's house, he got out, went to the front door and knocked, and got no answer. He thought that was strange. It was getting dark, and it was unusual at that time of day for no one to be there. He started to turn around and get back into his truck, and then it occurred to him to go around back and check. They had a raised, closed-in patio with a large window that looked out over their backyard. During the fall and winter, they often would be there under the warmth of a wood-burning stove, sipping coffee, reading newspapers and magazines, and listening to the radio. When he got around back, he could hear the sound of music on the radio as he went in. He saw his friend there with his back to him, standing and looking out the window. Then he noticed the rifle leaning in the corner by the window. Then my grandfather called out to him, "Donnie, what the hell's going on?" When Donnie turned around, my grandfather said that he had a strange look on his face, a look that he had never seen before from his friend. And he asked what was wrong, and where Beverly was. That was his wife. Donnie was silent for another few moments, then looked up and said, "What? Beverly? She's down at the Clearys. Her and Helen are working on a new quilt." My grandfather responded, "Okay, then what is it? What's wrong?" "There was a thing down there in the yard, over by that tree." He pointed to a small pine tree to our left and close to the fence. Then my grandfather asked him, "A thing? What kind of a thing?" "I don't know. I don't know what the hell it was. It was like a wolf, a big goddamn wolf. I mean, this thing was 3.5, 4 feet at the hip easy. I've never seen anything like it." Naturally, my grandfather asked him for more details. "What else? Tell me more about how it looked." "Well, shit. It had pitch black fur, long snout, pointed ears, and its eyes, man, its fucking eyes were like orange and the size of a flashlight lens." When my grandfather got to this part of the story, I realized how big most flashlight lenses were in the 40s. The fact that Donnie compared that to the creature's eyes scared the fire pit shit out of me. Then Donnie said he got his rifle, went around to the top of the stairs, and got the creature in his sights. Then he said at that exact moment the creature reared up on its back feet and took its front feet to grab onto the tree and stood up on 2 legs. Aside from the shock of seeing a huge wolf stand up on 2 legs, he said that he could see that its front paws weren't really paws at all, but hands. Hands with fingers that could spread out like a person's to hold on to the tree. He also said that at the distance he was from the creature, that it was a fairly easy shot. But he said something in his head made him hesitate. It was 4 words registering in his mind. "Don't pull the trigger." And then the wolf thing looked up and directly at him, and for a moment their eyes locked, and as sunset continued to give way to darkness, the creature cleared the fence, fell back down onto 4 legs, and vanished into the cold night. Then Donnie said, "Come with me, let me show you something." So the 2 of them went down the stairs into the backyard and walked over to the tree where the creature had been. Donnie used his rifle to indicate on the tree how tall the wolf creature was when it stood up on 2 legs. My grandfather was like, "Shit, that would make the damn thing almost 8 feet tall." The 2 men stood there for a few moments just staring at each other, shaking their heads. My grandfather said that he and Donnie scouted around the area a number of times after that, but they never saw the wolf thing. They did find some large tracks down by a nearby creek, tracks they were both sure were made by the creature. That was, of course, 80 years ago. The werewolf was yet to become the horror film genre fixture that it would be in subsequent years, and way back then, nobody used the term Dogman. But I'm sure that that was the creature that made an appearance that day. Sadly, both men are now long gone, but their story lives on. And oh, by the way, I hope that while you're listening to this story, that you and yours have a creepy Christmas.